So, Janey, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation, and truly just a conversation about standing in love, tussling with hard truths. So we started working on this project in July. I look at it as like that the start. That's the starting point, just because we had a conversation about your story then and your goals with the story to be seen and to also help other people who may have had similar experiences. And also this whole idea of healing, you're helping to heal our community, the Black community, in different ways. So, this conversation, a casual conversation about our experience for, my work with NYU. So we'll dive right into it, right? And the first piece is, first of all, tell everyone your name, your occupation, your pronouns, all the things that we do before these types of things.
Yes, so my name is Janey Nemard. I am a New York native, born and raised. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I currently am a financial educator and I teach financial literacy to young men and women to learn how to save their money and budget for things like what we see for 2020 right now in crises. Yeah, and by day, actually, I'm a teacher coach as well. So I coach teachers here in North Tulsa, Black Wall Street, you might know it as. And we work with children who are in poverty, who live in poverty. And a lot of our teachers are Caucasian. Um, so I support them in knowing how to teach in a culturally responsive way,
Mhm.
but also to make sure that we're always keeping the bar high for our students so that they are high reaching. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so the first question is why did you make this documentary? Why did you want to make this documentary? So it's become many different things. It's become a documentary, docu-series, web series. We're still trying to figure out what platforms we're going to put it on, but definitely in a space where it's accessible. Why did you want to do this?
Okay, so there are two main reasons why I wanted to do this project. The first one being that I wanted to be seen, heard, and understood. For a very long time, I've kept quiet. I've held secrets, some that were mine and some that weren't of my own. And I didn't speak up for myself growing up. So this was a chance for me to really start to use my voice in order to be heard and understood.
Mhm.
And then the second piece of this is because I am a representation of many young men and women, and some older. And a lot of times we don't speak our truth. So the most important part of this project for me is to be 100% truthful with myself and my story in hopes that other people will feel encouraged to speak their truth. So yeah.
Yeah, and I love that you say that because, and as I think about it, all the work we've been doing, your answer just now is like, is the truth traumatic? And why don't we actually tell the truth? And that's a whole thesis, a dissertation, conversation for the ages to talk about Black people and truth and what that means. Let's talk about the filmmaking process. It has been quite the journey and quite the roller coaster ride from beginning of this heightened moment of being excited about this project, right, to midpoints of it's cool, kind of being on the maybe the edge a bit, like maybe should I not, and then going to very low points, like oh my god, even to tears at certain points. Let's talk about your experience with the filmmaking process. What was that like for you?
The filmmaking process actually was not as difficult as I thought it was going to be.
Hmm.
Um, it was easy to talk about my experiences, and one of the reasons because I like to chat. Okay,
We like to talk.
I
We,
like to talk.
yes.
So, that part did make it easy. But I think also, remember, we bought in focus groups. So we built community around this too. And all of these people were my friends, my dear friends. So I think that made it easier as well. And then, of course, having you as my producer and also close to me personally. And then also with your background in therapy, right? Like that made the process eye-opening along the way. Now there were some like low points and there were some high points. Um, but we got through it. And I think that I would definitely do the experience again. And I think it's worth other people potentially giving it a try for sure.
Yeah, that's way cool. It's so funny that we had the fire trucks in the background while you were talking about the process, especially at low points. It was like one of those moments where we're just like, "What's happening?" Oh my god! Because it's not as easy to tell our stories. Although we like talking, when we tell our
Mhm.
stories, like the first time is okay because you're kind of just getting it out. But because you had to tell the story multiple
Over.
times, right? So talk about that, right? How many times did you have to tell the story that you remember? And if you could describe each moment you had to tell a story or the feelings attached to it, what was that like?
Okay, so if I think about, okay, so we're gonna go through this. The first time I told the story to you, I was excited and I was just ready to get it out. I was ready to like, yeah, I'm gonna tell the world, I'm gonna say everything, it's gonna be great, right? Everybody's gonna get healed, right? That was my initial thought. Then you kept asking me questions, and I'm like, why is he asking me questions? Why do I have to go deeper? Um, and at some point, we hit a block where it was just kind of like, I don't want to go that deep. Like, can we just stay right here? Like, this is good. And that was probably about like the third or fourth time we were getting into the my story. And then there was a point where I tried to do it alone. I tried to do it alone. And by this point, that was probably about the sixth or seventh time because we were trying to get a certain footage. We wanted to look a certain way for the aesthetic. And I had to go through the story again. Now that was difficult. I didn't realize how much I leaned on your support and the focus group support in order to get these things out. Because when I tried to speak my truth by myself in my own apartment, like that was hard. That was hard. And part of that reason is because there was some truth that I had never admitted before.
Mm.
So it was easy to say the things that I had written down in my journal. It was easy to say the things that I probably told close friends a couple of years ago, but it was difficult to tell the truth that I hadn't said to anybody ever. Um, and realistically, the hardest part was listening to it back.
Mm.
Because once I got over actually telling the truth and standing in love, it was like, dang, now I got to listen to it. Now I got to hear it back over and over again. Um, and the feelings that came up during that time was judgment, pure judgment of my decisions. And then even judging me today as in, I don't like the way that I'm talking. I don't like the way that I'm articulating myself. I have to look at the damage to my eye all the time through these videos as well. So it felt like a reminder. It felt like I looked like what I've been through, and I didn't like that. I didn't like to look at that. So yeah, by the end, it was definitely more judgment. Over time, though, it became easier. Again, having you to go through the edits with, uh, it did make it easier to digest my story
Mhm.
as someone who is wanting to be removed from my story. And I think that I learned that there's no way to separate myself from my experience because it's how I became to be. Um, But I think that while I was looking at it back, I was trying to say like, that's not me, that's someone else. That's a different version of me, right? Like I don't want to take ownership of that. So yeah, those are some of the feelings that came up.
I mean, we could just take that segment and just make, I mean, have so many other questions that come from that. And I'm going to stay on schedule. But it's one of those moments where you talked about the whole idea of, so the title is Standing in Love, Tussling with Hard Truths. So this whole idea of listening to hard truths, digesting hard truths, witnessing hard truths, especially when they're our own, right? So this whole idea of what happens in the process when you're looking back. You're looking, excuse me, not looking back, when you're watching yourself tell the story or your story. Like that's a whole different process that happens. And I think that there's therapeutic value in that, and it's cathartic in so many ways, but it's so many things. And I won't go into that because that's going to be like a part 20 of our conversation. So look, thank you for sharing about your experience with the filmmaking process. So there was a point where you said to me, Aunrée, I can't do this piece, right? Speaking of when you were watching it back yourself. And then when I first read the text or the message, I was just like, oh my God, like she wants to cancel the project. And in my mind, I was still stuck there, right? So what made you have that moment of like, nope, pause or stop or cancel or whatever was in your mind or correct whatever my thoughts were?
Mhm. That was around the time that I tried to do it myself.
Mm,
And I felt like I needed to be able to get through telling my story on my own.
mhm,
AKA, I slipped back into I'm independent and I don't need nobody, and this is my story, and I'm gonna tell it the way I want.
mhm,
Right? I slipped back into that mindset. And because of that, I was overwhelmed. I was overwhelmed with my own shame, my own guilt, my own judgment. And so I texted you and I was like, I can't do this. And what I should have said is, I can't do this alone.
mm,
Because that is what I was getting at, is that I could not do that by myself. Because there was never a time where I was like, I'm not trying to do this project at all.
mhm.
It's interesting you say that, because when I was talking to my partner, he asked me too. He said, you don't want to do it anymore? Right? So because the both of you had the same reaction, I had to realize that I wasn't communicating that I needed help, because I'm not used to communicating that I need help. So my fight or flight kicked in, but what my heart wanted to say was, I need help doing this and I can't do it by myself.
Mm.
But I didn't know how to say that.
You know, what's interesting about it is that, I don't know how you manage and function in business as far as partnering with people, but this whole idea of, we're in the art, right? We're using art as a medium to tell the story, right? And it's truly a partnership. I'm a co-director, co-whatever in this experience. And in that moment, it was like, two things. It was your experience as a person, your story, the trauma, the re traumatization. But then the business side of it is that, hey, we have a deal to make this art or this piece of work, and you're backing out. Like, what's up with that? We have a contract in our heads to make this all happen. So, what made you gear back up and jump back in and say, hey, let's do it?
Well, because remember our first conversation, this project was never about me. So, and then if I think about who I am in my day-to-day life, right? I'm a financial educator. I'm also um, a teacher's coach for children. I am of service.
Mm,
This project is a serving project.
mm,
And if I back out of being in service, then what am I doing? What am I doing? So I had to truly get out of my own way and say that, yes, this heals me directly, but indirectly, this project is for the person who's not yet in this place to talk.
mm.
This project is for the person who's still in bondage in their own ways. So I just had to realize that it's bigger than me. And that's my cause for standing in love, tussling with hard truths. So I had to jump back in, fear and all. I took my bag of fear, my bag of shame, I took my bag of guilt, and we ran straight through. Because, I mean, that's what we had to do.
I love that it's called a projective technique in therapy. Is this whole idea of separating the feeling the experience from yourself and actually using it in metaphor and in like, something that's tangible. And I love how you pack them up and, I think it produces a good amount of distance between ourselves and the
Mhm.
emotions. So we can say, I have control of it, right?
Mm,
It's a lot, but I have control of it. It's a part of me, but I still can manage it. That's so, so dope. Love it.
yeah.
Love in so many ways. Um, so the next question is: has the process of filmmaking changed or made an impact in your life? Has it changed your life? Has it made an impact? Has it done both?
Mhm. I don't know if it changed my life, but I do think that it has supported me in expression.
Mm,
Because as I said before, is that part of me watching it back was um, judging the way in which I expressed myself.
mm,
So having the practice of speaking, watching it back, putting it out for the public to see has been beneficial for me in just growing my own public speaking and looking at myself and being okay with that, because that's still something that I battle with. Um, catching myself in a moment in time. And then I have been able to expand on this filmmaking process by doing the video documentary, like journaling
Mm-hmm.
on my camera. So that has been helpful for me, to bring some variety of the way that I'm expressing myself. So through video, through audio, like just plain audio, and through writing as well. Those three things, having all three of those tools have been helpful, like really blending them together. And I for sure think that I'm going to continue doing that for myself and just like documenting me as I am learning and growing, and just other experiences as well, so that we can have footage of that.
Mm-hmm. One thing that comes to mind when you say that is this whole idea of, I'm thinking about filters, and this whole idea of how people put filters over themselves on social media,
Yeah.
in order to make themselves look a certain way, and then they look in the mirror and they don't look like that, and then it's this whole like, process. And I think that in the process of working on this project, especially with the piece that you talked about when you had to look at it or view it on your own, right, is that you get to see yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because by that time that you watched it, we had told it so many times that you had a lot of truths that were buried that you had pulled up. So it was one of those moments that it's just like, no filter.
No
We
filter.
truly get to look at ourselves with no filter. Now, I'm not against a filter. I love beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But when it comes down to our truth, we got to
Yeah.
drop those filters. Sorry, Instagram,
Yeah.
in that sense. So I love that. Yeah. Anything you want to share on that, or?
I mean, I agree. I think about, because my eye was so damaged, um, within the last physical altercation that I had with my ex-boyfriend, filters have become my thing on social media. Especially if I want to take my glasses off, right? If I have my glasses on, I'm probably not going to do too much of a filter. But if I want to take my glasses off, I'm like, not only is the eye all the way on this side of my face, but it's red and it's a little small. And it's like, I can critique it all day long. So I definitely have been a part of the generation of people who are like, I need a filter. I'm not posting things without a filter. Um, but what's interesting about telling your story is it doesn't matter what you look like, because if you just listen to your story, you still there's no filter on that, unless you're like a wordsmith who can alter your words in a way that you want them to be. But that just takes too much work. And realistically, when you're living and standing and being in your truth, you don't have time to calculate how you're going to say the truth, because no matter how you slice the truth, it is what it is. So you can't really put a filter on the audio. You could probably put a filter on, we can still put filters on the videos. We can edit them, we can cut them, we can do all types of things. But when you listen to the audio with no visual, the truth is still going to prevail. And that's really what we have to deal with.
Yeah, that's fact. You talk about the power of audio in the process of the filmmaking experience and what that is, because the truth lives in that audio, and then moving to that place of editing, right? Because to me, it seems like that's where like the hard work comes in. Editing in general is very difficult because you're trying to figure out what works, what's the aesthetics. There's a lot of content, but this other piece of actually having, you have to listen to make sure that you're pulling all the things that are important. But the power of the editing and the audio, I love that you pull those things out to really focus in on them to find them useful. And what has been the most challenging part or parts of this filmmaking process for you?
Okay, so not to be redundant, I'll pick up another piece that was challenging. It was actually something between you and I, actually, right? There, at one point, there was a time where you were asking me questions and you wanted a specific answer. And you had to ask yourself, am I listening to your story, or am I listening for the story I want to tell? So that can be a little challenging, right? Because if somebody who's sitting in my seat as the person who is doing the healing and learning how to speak their truths, and they're partnering with someone to support them with that, we have to be accountable for making sure that it's our truth and not the truth of the therapist or the truth of the producer. It has to be your truth, right? Not the truth that somebody else wants to see, hear, and feel.
I love, love, love that, because that's what happens in the process. So the challenge of being therapist director, right, is that you go in like it's a couple of different things. So it's this whole idea of producing a great piece of art, artwork, whatever's in the mind, right, and then being a co and saying, okay, this is how we're going to do it together, and then B C D E F G is like, this is what I kind of see in my head in the process. And you, hello, as the protagonist, as the one with the actual story. So this is beyond being a protagonist. This is your trauma. This is your story, right? So it's this whole idea of, no, that's not what it's like. That's not what it is.
Yep.
And being brave enough.
So when you're somebody who is, like you just said, you got to be brave enough. If you've never spoke your truth, you've never heard your truth, you've made bad decision after bad decision, and it's hurt you in such a way, you have guilt, you have all these things, but somehow you have to stand in your truth, and you've got to advocate for it at the same time. That's difficult. It can be difficult.
It's a big challenge. But then it goes back to the whole idea of the goal of helping people heal, right? Is that's a part of it, is that you have to be courageous enough to own your space in the world, and not allow someone else to tell your story, and to make sure that in the process that they're getting it right. I think it's a very, very powerful moment. And I think that you handled it very well. Of course, there was tension in the process, because that's just what happens. Tension happens in the therapy space with the therapist. It definitely happens when you're co-creating something. So, I honor you for truly tussling with that was happening and fixing it and making sure that it worked right. That's big. So folks, get into it. Like, take care of your life. Take care of yourself, and don't let anyone else tell your story. Okay, so you telling this story about your childhood, molestation, the fights with your boyfriend, and then your ex-boyfriend, excuse me, and then it went into this space of Black families, secrets in Black families, the Black mother. So all those things started coming up. Looking for love in the wrong places, all that. So yeah, can you talk more about that?
Yes, because you want to know what it is that they're all interconnected. You cannot talk about trauma without talking about culture, especially in the Black community, because that's the umbrella. The umbrella is culture. Then we can get into the little nooks and crannies of secrets, of dietary foods, of shaming. We can, we got into sex.
Yeah.
Sex was a drive for a lot of what I was doing. I was blinded by it. There was a recent album out by my fave Jasmine Sullivan, but there's also a song that's a little bit old by my celebrity husband, Jamie Foxx. Okay.
Oh, tell me more.
We love Jamie.
I live.
We do. But he has a song and he's talking about sex being a drug. Because it can be stronger than love in a lot of times, because if a lot of people in general get honest about why they still with somebody, 9 times out of 10 it's going to be sex. So one of the bigger topics that we talked about was, it's just sex, or is it, right? Is it not, or what have you? So that was a big topic. And we talked about looking for attention and looking for love in the wrong places. Where do you find that? And I think the bigger question is, should you be searching for it, or is it something that should have been given to you as a child? So we pretty much got into like different voids that we feel in general, that people find it hard to talk candidly about.
How do we figure out these are the points we need to talk about?
Well, you want to know what's interesting? That's when I relied on my teammate, AKA you. So You actually broke it down after hearing all of my experience, and in your mind, you were able to pull out just different pieces, and then you also sent me different articles and different statistics and things like that, so that I could have a little bit more background and to deepen my understanding of domestic violence, of trauma. So you really supported me with figuring out all these little pieces. And then from there, we both kind of came to a conclusion together, like we should bring people in for this. And then I started to search out for focus group members. They're all my friends within the same age group as me, in their like mid to late 20s. And and then we set up some time, we got on these Zooms and we talked about it. And everybody was super engaged, 100% honest and authentic. And they stood in their truths. People left those focus groups feeling like I have a community, like, whew, thank you for having me here. Right. So yeah, and that's kind of like how we talked about all these things. And then we just have to figure out, how are we going to combine the focus group footage with my story, as we filmed it, to really show how these things connect to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And how, in my experience, as I was developing in my adolescence and young adult ages, how those topics, so it's just sex, searching for attention, looking for attention in the wrong places, looking for love in the wrong places. And I can't think of the last one because there were four.
Mm-hmm.
There
Was
were
it
four.
Black women raising men? Did you cover that?
Yes, Black women raising men. So how these topics um, connect to me going through being molested, me going through deciding to lie to my parents when I had multiple opportunities to be truthful, um, me getting into a relationship with someone who was no good for me. And I knew that from the jump street, but I convinced myself to stay. Just kind of blending all these different things together, because you've got to get into the why. Those topics come from the why. Why did you do it? Why did you stay? Why did you lie? Why did you do that? So not just telling the truth, but explaining the truth.
It brings up so many things. It's so fabulous. I've learned so much about um, respecting people's process and really like truly making that space for that to people to tell their stories and to go deeper and to pose those questions to dive deep and deeper. And then this whole idea, going back to what you said about listening to your story by yourself and how difficult it was, I think this whole idea that we continue to bring home is that we need to stick together. Do you think that things were missing? Like, what would you add?
I honestly can't think of anything. I think one of the things that I wish we would have done
Yeah.
is recorded our off camera conversations, because not only were they hysterical, but also, there were some profound truths that came out in even those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
I think that everything should be recorded. I think the process of making the film should be recorded,
How about that?
because that's where the meat really comes in, right? That's where the hard questions are answered. That's where the tears come.
Yeah.
That's where I get to take off the mask of telling the story and feel what I just said, right?
No, but you bring up a great point, Janae, and which is great because then that makes more work for other students to do and more research on filmmaking as therapy for someone to look at the behind the scenes. Because the true BTS being, almost like reality television where the cameras are following, right? So that's the value of reality TV. Like, I don't support it 100% because I think it makes people act ugly, especially when it's guided. That's the
But I
thing.
push back just a little bit.
Yeah.
And here's why. Because remember, it's really for the culture, right? What we're doing. And a lot of us don't know how to cry. And we don't know what it looks like.
Yeah.
And we need that guidance. So
Yeah.
I do think that for this instance, in this context, we need to see that. We need to see somebody broken down while they're healing, because folks don't know how ugly it can get.
Mm.
And how deep the wounds are, and how deep our sorrows are, and the cries that we have out. Like, people need to see that this is the pain that we are just putting on our kids generation after generation after generation, that we're allowed. That's the pain. You need to see that pain.
I,
I think so. I think somebody
you
needs
know,
to see that.
you're, it's massive. It's massive. Absolutely. And I say no. When I say no, I'm like, you know how we say no when we're actually saying hell yeah. And that was a moment, because I'm thinking about a moment when you told the truth
Mm-hmm.
about the damage, and how it all happened. And that, between George Floyd, the Black Lives Matter movement, where I am in my life, being there, it was therapeutic for me, because that shit broke me down to my knees. I mean, if I wasn't sitting in the stool at that moment, I would have totally been on the floor in fetal position. And another powerful moment is the fact that someone else's truth, although it may have nothing to do with you, can make you find your brokenness in the
Mm-hmm.
process. So I love that. I love that moment. So you're right. Film it all. Especially in this case, we can film it all and it'd be, valuable.
Yeah, it's valuable footage.
So this is a big question too. So what are the benefits, or what do you think are the benefits of using film um, as therapy with
Mm-hmm.
individuals who have experienced domestic violence?
Whew, that's a big one. But I think that the biggest benefit really is in the playback. It really is. I think the biggest benefit is in the playback. We need to hear and see ourselves. And we have to deal with how we look at ourselves
Mm.
in order to change the behavior. Because as I was watching back, and I'm like, I'm really judging myself hard.
Mm.
Would I have admitted that I was judgmental had I not been judging myself?
It's a moment.
Would I be honest about my patterns if I wasn't listening to myself? Because I'm judging myself, right? So now I can see all the flaws in my decision making. And I think that that's powerful, because we have to look at ourselves. We have to say, like, baby, you play a part in this.
Mm.
You play a part in your trauma. It's not 100% your fault. It's probably not even 90% of your fault. But you made a choice. Maybe your back was against the wall. Maybe it was the only choice that you had. We could come up with every reason why you made the choice, but what did you do? You made the choice.
Mm. No,
And
that's major.
we have to deal with that. I made the choice to continue to go back to him. Granted, my reason was because I was insecure. Granted that my reason was because I didn't feel loved as a child. Granted, my reason was that I became promiscuous because of molestation. Yeah, all of these reasons, they're all valid. But the truth of the matter is, I still made the choice.
What does that do for you today, though? That that you made these choices that were, not so beneficial, not so great when you were younger growing up, and now that you know better, you do better, Maya Angelou. Um, Being in that space. So when you look back at it, what's healing about the process of looking at your choices and saying that they were poor then and they're better now, hopefully? What was that like for you? What is that like for you?
It was forgiveness.
Mm.
Forgiving myself for all of the things that I've done. It was giving myself grace. It was saying, like, girl, it was a hard decision. You didn't necessarily make the best one, but that's okay. That's okay, because you're still here, you're still standing, you still have the ability to move forward, right? Like, everything in your life is not jammed up.
Mm.
And I think that's something else that we take for granted, is that this part of your life might look a little iffy, but there are other parts of your life that you're thriving in.
Mm.
So you have the ability to make good decisions. You have the ability to surround yourself with great people. You have everything that you need already. So it truly was in the forgiveness and giving myself grace to say that tomorrow is another day that you can choose to be better. You can choose to teach somebody what you've learned. You can choose to see somebody in your position and have empathy for them.
Mhm.
You can choose to see a child in need and support them. You can now make different decisions for your life.
When you walk in to edit the footage and you are the protagonist, it's your story, because you're going to judge yourself, because we just do that as humans. Should we walk in with the intentions of forgiving ourselves and giving ourselves grace?
I think that would be beneficial for sure. Because if you're like, listen, I know what I'm about to hear is not going to make me happy, but I'm going to do my best to stand on the side of optimism. That would be great. See, I didn't necessarily walk into into that space with that mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I came to that decision, but that has everything to do with my personality.
Mm-hmm.
I'm extremely introspective. I seek healing, right? So that was a byproduct of who I am naturally. But I do think for the person who's not like that, they probably need to be coached in like, hey, I want you to know that this might be ugly. You might not be happy with everything that you hear, but I want you to keep an open mind, keep an open heart, make sure that you're forgiving yourself, um, and advocate if you need time to digest.
I mean, Janette, is huge. It's a teaching point, right? We're building out what filmmaking as therapy is. I mean, that's what this work is all about, or this project that we're talking about right now. So that whole idea of making sure that those tools are set, that we set the protagonist up or the client up to make sure that they have intentions of safety in the process, or safe enough that we're covering that. So I appreciate you having that insight. It's important
Mhm.
work. Yeah.
I think what's interesting about this project is that I came to you.
Right. You initiated the whole entire experience. Yeah.
Right. So in my mind, I keep thinking of Miss Ayanla Van Zandt. We love you too, sis. We
Exactly.
love you. You are the realist on Oprah Winfrey Network. I'm just gonna say
Beloved. I
it.
had to. I
Truly,
had to. I had to.
she is. She is. So, but I'm thinking about her, right? People write into Ayanla. They write into her and they say, "My family needs help." Right? So the difference between what I did and what those families are doing is that they're probably dragging people with them who don't want the healing,
Mm-hmm.
who are like, you know what, we're just gonna do it. We might be on TV. I like to argue with y'all anyway. These are probably the thoughts that are happening with the family members. And I think what separates this is that I'm taking control of my truth, not my mom's and my grandmother's and my dad's. This is me. And I think that's the difference between what we're doing and the type of healing shows, films
Mm-hmm.
that we see on television,
Mm-hmm.
is that I didn't come here and say, heal my family. I came here and said, I'm looking for healing for me.
Mm-hmm.
What truth do I have to give out? So whether you're someone who is a survivor of domestic violence, someone who is a survivor of sexual assault, someone who is a survivor of any type of abuse that has caused major trauma in your life and probably has been over, years of time, the essence of this project is I'm seeking it for me, not the person who hurt me and not the person who I felt neglected me. So realistically, you've got to come to terms with that you're ready to uncover everything that you've been hiding deep down inside of your heart, inside of your chest, inside of your mind.
Wow.
That's the only way this works.
It's fantastic, but it goes back to we go to therapy to heal ourselves, right? In the process. So even in this process of filmmaking, is that it's about the story, but the story is to heal the storyteller or a
But
protagonist.
you have to be ready for it. And I
Yeah.
think that's a part that we miss a lot.
Yeah.
Some people are not ready to be healed because some people are not ready to be honest.
Right. Some people don't even know that they're like damaged.
And then you have that.
Right. So there's a whole other piece of it too. But I mean, we say that about many things in life, right? You can take the horse to the water, but you can't make him drink. I mean, we have so many like cliches and things that we say about therapy, but like you said, you have to be ready. And it doesn't mean that, you know, well, maybe it does mean that people should do more, introspective work to see what problems they have. Because I think we all should we should do like assessments of ourselves 4 times a year. I think I told you that. It should be
Yeah.
seasonal. You know what I mean? And where am I? Who am I? What are people saying about me? How am I being perceived? How do I perceive myself? We're growing beings. We're what? Michelle Obama? Becoming. What are the benefits of using film and therapy within the Black community?
Okay. Whew. This is a big one because you know that saying, what happens in this house stays in this house.
Wow.
And the thing about footage is that anybody could get their hands on it potentially. So then your business is out in the street. And Black folk don't like that. So I think it's letting go of secrets. That's why it's beneficial in the Black family.
Mm-hmm.
It's simply because of that. Because we don't want Uncle Johnny to be exposed. We don't want to talk about this marriage that is hurting the family. We don't want to talk about the matriarch and how they play a role in manipulation in our families a lot of time. We don't want to talk about those things and have it recorded, potentially get leaked.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we need this in the Black community because it's so much shame that we carry. We're not willing to say it aloud, but simply because we don't want somebody else to see it.
Mm-hmm.
But then that means that we don't want people to see us.
Mm-hmm.
That means that we don't think that we're worthy of being seen.
Mm-hmm.
That means that we think that our truth is going to scare away people because deep down we feel like those people are not really here for us. They're only here for what we can do for them. They're only here for the side of us that we present. Because if those same people knew who we were for real, they'd run away. And then again, that brings me down deeper because if you knew your real self, you'd run away.
Mm. So the process of being okay with who you are, it seems like that's a benefit that happens in the process too. I think that one thing too to make clear in the process of filmmaking as therapy, especially for Black communities, because we still have to get through the process of saying um, certain things shouldn't be exposed, right? Because there are a lot of evil people, and everyone has an opinion.
Right.
Right? We're talking about ourselves, looking back at the footage, like giving ourselves grace and saying to ourselves, we're doing this, when we go into it, make sure that we're forgiving ourselves for our past, right? There are certain people as spectators who don't, have that mindset. They're there to spectate and to judge it, right? So it's not about this piece that people are putting together, families, people in general, putting on any platform outside of themselves. I mean, we're talking about using this sometimes, filmmaking as therapy, just for ourselves, just for the person, right? It's not always to put out into the world. For Christ's sake, Janey, we went through that whole process, right? We're going through it right now.
Yeah.
You haven't launched this project to any platform yet because it's this whole idea of I'm going to be judged.
Yeah. And what to put out, what not to put out.
Right.
And I do like that you honed in on that. Like sometimes it's just for us. And in the world of social media, I think we've lost that. We've lost a sense of privacy.
Mm-hmm.
Because everything is just out there. Everything is quick, fast, and hurry. 250 characters, get it out, make it concise. Short videos, 15 seconds, show me everything. OnlyFans became a really big thing in 2020, right?
Mm-hmm.
All these things. So yes, using film for like diaries and things like that, how it has helped me is to be raw with myself daily, not just when I'm putting a project together.
Mm-hmm.
Is to take up space for myself and allocate time to say like, I'm going to have this conversation with God, with my ancestors, with me. I'm going to have this space to do this for myself, to take care of me. And maybe you never watched the playbacks, or maybe you watch it back once, and that's okay. Because it's just like any other diary method, you kind of have it as a safekeeping. And if you need to remember what that pain felt like because you was going to make a similar decision, you can go back to your go back to your videos and see how you reacted to that. Not just read the entry that you wrote, but actually see and feel it in real time.
It's such a big part of the process. I was talking with one of my colleagues about the whole idea of somatic empathy. And when she brought that up, it blew my mind because, you know, sometimes we'll miss the words that someone says, but we will react to how their body is reacting to what's happening in the space. Or we'll only get a certain portion of the story or what's being shared in the conversation, but the body tells so much. Like, oh, I remember how she was sitting in that situation, so she seemed very uncomfortable with whatever she was talking about. Or that whole idea of freezing the moment, like pausing it and looking like what's kind of happening. We had those moments too. I mean, we sat in different positions throughout, and you know, I don't know if it shifted so much in different cases.
And it makes me think about like back when, long before I was even a thought, when the audio was separated from the film. Remember, we had those silent films.
Yeah, yeah.
And there weren't any like, you know, subtitles or anything, and they were in black and white. So there's definitely power in, like you said, even if you don't even have the audio, or maybe you only have the audio, or maybe you have a combination of both. It's whether you separate the two things or you put them together, they're going to be beneficial regardless, because the truth is going to prevail. The truth is going to seep out. It's going to come through all the cracks. And we just have to honor that.
Have you incorporated any of the learnings from the filmmaking process into your life or lifestyle since we finished recording the story?
Yes, and it has been the number one thing that I've been working on is how I express myself. So for me, that has been a bit of a hurdle because I hadn't practiced expressing myself. And when I did, unfortunately, I'd lie about certain things. So back in 2012, whenever I decided that I wanted to work with my character, that was the first thing that I started with. I vowed I was never going to lie again. And from there, I kind of just stopped talking because I felt like my truth was too real for, like, you see how I am. I don't hold no bars. Very cut and dry, right? So I didn't necessarily go mute or anything, but I just didn't say a lot. And when people asked me questions, they started to pick up that like I didn't have a filter. So it's like, you know, I'm not even gonna ask her things. So, you know, people did not want the truth from me because it'd be too truthful. It'd be hard truths because I didn't sugarcoat things. So now, a few years later, I am learning how to express myself while still telling the truth in a way that is digestible. So for me, this project has helped me to learn how to be kind with my truth.
It's a big lesson for people to be kind with their truth and kind to themselves.
Because remember, we did have that one piece of footage and I said, Aunrée, we've got to record that again.
Yeah. Remember? Yeah.
Because I wanted to stand in whole truth.
Yeah.
So for me, like that was one of my biggest takeaways, was to express myself with grace, but still in honesty.
Standing in love, tussling with hard truths. What does the documentary title, or what does this project's title mean to you?
Everything, honestly. Whew. The thing that every human wants is to be loved. And after reading all about love, come on now, Miss Bell Hooks.
Love her.
So much about love and what love means and what it feels like and the strength of love, the power of love. So I really wanted my title to represent how I'm choosing to live, and I'm choosing to live in love. The subtitle, Tussling with Hard Truths, really comes about because the truth hurts. It can hurt. And whenever we find ourselves in a position where we want to neglect the truth because of pain, That's not okay. So we've got to fight. We've got to fight with the truth. We have to tussle with the truth while being a person of ultimate love for themselves.
Mhm.
So I really wanted the title to embody all of that. And then, I don't know where this comes from, but sometimes the simplest thing can be the most profound.
Mhm.
So the title itself is very simple and it's extremely profound. But when you get into the film, it's hard to do. It's not an easy task, but it's the goal. The goal is to stand with love, in love, all the time,
Mhm.
and face the truth of what's happening, not only in my life, but what's happening in society,
Mhm.
right? What's today's date? Today's January 9th of 2021. If we just look at this past week, we have to stand in love while we tussle with the truth of America.
Major.
We have to. We have to love people more than they hate us. Therefore, we have to love our truth and tussle with our truth more than our truth wants to define us.
Powerful. How important is a title to someone's story?
Um, it's paramount.
Tell me why you feel
You
that.
taught you taught me that the title is the first thing that a person sees on any project, any label, or anything, right? The title is the first thing that you see. It's the branding.
Mhm.
And you want the title to tell people where they're going by the end of this.
Mhm.
So after you expressed that to me and you taught me that piece, um, it became the most important thing because that's the grounding factor. So whenever the truth gets hard and I find myself, I'm tussling and I'm face down, and in the ring, shout out to Brene Brown, because that's her thing, right? When you're in the ring and you're face down and all the dust is covered all over you, and you have nothing else to give.
Mhm.
I want you to stand and stand in love. Don't stand in fear. Don't stare in shame. Don't stand in judgment. Don't do any of those things. Stand in love because that's the thing that's going to prevail you to the other side. So your title is what's going to be the grounding force of whatever film you're working on.
Mhm. That's it. That's it. Janae, thank you for yet again another fantastic conversation. We could do this 1,000 times, um, and pose different questions about the whole experience. So I appreciate again. Um, Thank you for teaching me to stand in love and to tussle with hard truths uh, at every point in my life. And that's a beautiful gift to give to our community, very specifically. I was going to say to everyone else, but truly to our community. It's rich.
Well, thank you for doing this with me, for trusting me with your success and your endeavors with NYU. Like, this was awesome. So happy to be here and to be a part of this groundbreaking film, because that's what we're going to call it.
How about
Um, yeah, it has been great. I learned a lot about me. I've learned a lot about you. I've learned a lot about healing. So I'm grateful for this moment as well.
brilliant? Thank you, Janae.